But who is Klaus Schwab? The man that sits at the helm of the World Economic Forum, the WEF. Well, investigative journalist Johnny Vedmore has spent a long time investigating Klaus Schwab, and he joins me now. And Johnny, as we were talking here before the show, I mean, it's not just about Klaus Schwab. These tentacles are deep and they are wide. What made you start investigating Klaus Schwab?
Yeah, me. Thanks for having me on, Clayton. Me and my girlfriend Whitney, we were sitting around the coffee table in Chile, and we were looking for information on him. And Whitney said to me, "Why don't you investigate Klaus Schwab? You go back in the time through the elites of history. Why don't you look? Because there's nothing out there about him, which is in great contrast to what is now." And I feel that's really affected by the information I found, because everything had been scrubbed online, and that intrigues any investigative journalist. And I love going back through history. So I went back as far as I could. I started backwards from Schwab's in the past, because so much had been deleted. There's no point in going back through time. You have to start already in history and look at all of the Schwabs. So basically, I spent 4 to 5 weeks just searching every Schwab in history in Germany and their ancestry. And I eventually found Klaus Schwab's ancestors, his father, his mother, his grandfather, and an amazing story surrounding it. An amazing story. Klaus Schwab, his father was Eugen Schwab, born 1898, and eventually, when he was older, he would work for a Nazi model company called Escher Weiss. And during the war, Escher Weiss would be central to the Nazi atomic bomb program. And so Klaus Schwab's father, who was managing director of the main factory in Ravensburg, was not only making submarine parts and aircraft parts for the Nazis, and potential atomic bomb casings for the Nazis as well. They were also making the large turbines that would power the heavy water hydroelectric dams that they normally built them for. It was the same way they enriched uranium for their type of process of atomic bomb making. And so he was a very important man, Eugen Schwab. Of course, the Nazis weren't successful. And when Klaus was growing up, Germany was being reconciled. It was trying to change its image to the rest of the world. They were trying to say, look at us, we're now kind, we got over it. And at the same time, America was kind of learning some of the tools that the Nazis had used. The American intelligence services were using some of those tools to kind of do the same tricks the Nazis were pulling in an attempt to fight communism. For a good aim, they were saying, we're going to fight back these Soviets. Before it, we need to get dirty. And they started, of course, we know Operation Paperclip. They started bringing people in. And there was lots of projects set up. And in 1950, there was a special project set up in Harvard called Kissinger's International Seminar. It was actually set up by William Yandell Elliott, a grandee of American politics, who basically had been advisor to 6 different presidents throughout his career, as a high-ranking CFR member. And he invented this seminar, which a newly graduated Kissinger was put in charge of, and it was about training young global leaders. And in 1965 or 64, Eugen Schwab, Klaus Schwab's father, would say to Klaus, the only place you're going to go to succeed in the world now is Harvard. And he went and got offered a place, because you didn't apply for Kissinger's International Seminar. You were often headhunted. You could apply, but only the best got in. And they were looking for the best potential young leaders. And Klaus Schwab, in 1965, joined the ranks of Kissinger's International Seminar, which he graduated in 1967, and was a CIA-funded course. On the year Klaus Schwab graduated in 1967, Humphrey Dorman of Harvard released preempting releases in the New York Times and another newspaper of the information, that the Kissinger's International Seminar had been funded between 1960 and 1966 by the CIA through American Friends of the Middle East, which was set up by Kermit Roosevelt, the Farfield Foundation, and the Asian Foundation.
Wow.
So Klaus Schwab had just gone through a CIA-funded course in Harvard. He was given, during that course, two mentors, one really fantastically interesting and important people in history, one being Herman Kahn, who's described as a real Dr. Strangelove, and is a guy you want to explore in detail, and John Kenneth Galbraith, another grandee of American politics, who was the teacher of JFK. JFK made him ambassador to India, wanted him to be ambassador to the Soviet Union. So, saw him in that sort of, held him in that sort of regard. And John Kenneth Galbraith has one of the most amazing histories around. And John Kenneth Galbraith, along with Otto van Habsburg, would become the keynote speakers in the First World Economic Forum, which was basically pushed forward by John Kenneth Galbraith and Herman Kahn, this team that had been given to Schwab through Harvard by Kissinger. They went back to get support for this new creation of what was a European Management Symposium that would 2 years later become the European Management Forum, and in the during the fall of the Soviet Union, it would become the World Economic Forum, which would show its true face. And so that's a course that Klaus Schwab went through. Now, in 1967, when he finished that course, he went back, and before they set up the World Economic Forum, he went back to work for his father's old company, Escher Weiss. Peter Schmidheiny, the CEO then, whose father had been Jacob Schmidheiny, had been the CEO while Eugen Schwab had been at Escher Weiss, phoned up Klaus Schwab, and Peter Schmidheiny said, hey, we've got a merger going on between Sulzer AG, Brown Boveri, Escher Weiss. We're merging them into a new company, and we want you at the helm. And what did Klaus Schwab do? He becomes second in charge of this merger and of these companies, and then the companies started selling illegally weapons technology, nuclear weapon technology, to the South African apartheid regime, and we want you at the helm. And what did Klaus Schwab do? He becomes second in charge of this merger and of these companies, and then the companies started selling illegally weapons technology, nuclear weapon technology, to the South African apartheid regime, so they could make bombs, which they made 6 bombs complete. They never tested their bombs. They made 6 complete nuclear bombs, with a 7th that was basically being constructed when they finally dismantled the program. This all came out in Swiss courts as well, so this is all documented in evidence. And this is what Klaus Schwab was at them. He did exactly the same as his father. His father helped a racist Nazi regime to try and create the atomic bomb to win World War II. And Klaus Schwab went on afterwards with his father's, pushing it on from behind to do exactly the same thing with South Africa. This all came out in Swiss courts as well, so this is all documented in evidence. And this is what Klaus Schwab was at them. He did exactly the same as his father. His father helped a racist Nazi regime to try and create the atomic bomb to win World War II. And Klaus Schwab went on afterwards with his father's, pushing it on from behind to do exactly the same thing with South Africa. And Klaus Schwab then, over years, Harvard, the project, the Kissinger's International Seminar, once exposed, kind of like sort of crumbled into the sea. Kissinger went off to serve in Nixon's cabinet, eventually getting into high levels and being responsible for some of the most amazing moments throughout history. Kissinger is a really interesting person in this. He's really important, and he stayed in the background, but in the 80s he started to get back involved with the World Economic Forum, showed his face. The World Economic Forum, really interesting at the start, because it started off, it had a really big, had these big names to open up the actual opening of the European Management Symposium. And then the second year stumbled a bit. And the third year, they got in Limits of Growth. They got in the Club of Rome. Aurelio Pecci was the keynote speaker. Just after they had written this, the Limits to Growth, which basically said, and he said it within the speech, that the enemy of humanity would be man itself in the future. And of course, we know that later on, Klaus Schwab in the 90s started up the Global Leaders for Tomorrow program, with the World Economic Forum when it rebranded. That was the start of recreating Kissinger's International Seminar.
Jeez.
And by 2004, the Dan David Foundation gave Schwab a $1 million prize, said, hey, have this prize that we give every year for all your hard work, do with it what you will. And he said, with this money, I'm going to make the Young Global Leaders Forum, so that we can base the Forum for Young Global Leaders, where we can industrially train global leaders that can then penetrate the cabinets, etc. Now, on the board of the Dan David Foundation, when they gave him this prize money to set up the Young Global Leaders, was, of course, Henry Kissinger. And it's just a cycle that goes round in a circle. Schwab recreated Henry Kissinger's International Seminar, which the German Marshall Fund based at Harvard from another Kissinger protege, Guido Goldman, had also run loads of leadership courses in between, but they hadn't had the same sort of impact that Kissinger's International Seminar had. Kissinger's International Seminar produced Pierre Trudeau, Klaus Schwab, and Valéry Giscard of France, the president of France, Japanese president, and Israeli prime minister. I mean, it really was a case that Kissinger's International Seminar was the gold standard of courses, and Klaus Schwab is the number one protege of Henry Kissinger.
And funded in part and starting out with the CIA. So, I mean, I think people have a right to be scared of this guy, right? I mean, you look at this family lineage here, you look at the money, you look at the influence, you look at the people who were funding and making sure that he was being guided in a certain way. It almost sounds like he didn't have any choice in this. Like, his dad, here's where you're going to be. You're going to be selected for this. You're going to carry out our mission. And this just goes absolutely deep. So over the past few years, a lot of people have grown increasingly scared of this guy, myself included, what he is up to. I guess it's a weird question for me to ask, but do we have a right to be scared of this guy and what his agenda is doing, what they're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, he's a very clever, because what people don't understand is why they should be really afraid. They can't really get it together. He looks like a Bond villain. They've made him almost comically like a Bond villain, so that everybody can say, "Oh, it's just Klaus Schwab again. Look, Dr. No and or Dr. Evil and Dr. No and all of those different things." But the thing is about the World Economic Forum, the reason why it's so powerful and important is not only because it creates all of these young global leaders, but it creates policies that everything relies on. It's the leading policy think tank, and they line up alongside with Edelman PR, and Edelman PR are the number one PR firm in the world. They handle marketing and PR for 60-70% of all companies, all governments, all everything. These guys are the globalists. They want to create something that it's like a prison for us all that is the same all the way around the world. Now, why they want to do it is partially because of, and it's in line with why Klaus Schwab rose to the top. When you've got Klaus Schwab's ability, when you're able to learn like Klaus Schwab has, he's a very intelligent man, especially in his youth. When you're able to go through all of these courses, get degree after degree, there's only a limited number of jobs that fit you, and there's a load of headhunters for those jobs. So there's only a very precise. This is what's happening now. We, the underclass, will have to do all of the main work, but these guys at the top, they raise themselves up in a separate system, and they create a separate system. So we should be worried, because this is a two-tier system that is happening in front of our eyes. We're coming to the end of something within capitalism that they all know about. The end of Pareto distribution, at the end of all of the wealth going to one area and being held by a certain group of people and everybody else not having wealth. That's communism. Capitalism ends in communism. Capitalism's death ends in this communitarian. And this is what they've done. What I think people like Kissinger and Schwab and others have done, Kahn, Galbraith, all of these people throughout history who have shaped this world that we're living in now, is they've looked at what works best throughout each ideology, what works best in fascism, what works best in communism, what works best in capitalism, what works best in normal democratic society, take little bits out of it that suits them and mash them all together and amalgamate them into something that can cover the entire world and keep us all in chains. And they've done a very good job of this. So it smells of everything. Everybody said this. You've got a load of people who will say it's communism, and a load of people who will say it's something else. But this is some sort of technocratic merging of all of the lessons these people have learned from the past.
And it drives down to all of us. And this is the monster. And you're right. It is not, he looks like a comic book character. He looks like a Bond villain, but it's incredibly nefarious. And I think the biggest complaint that I hear from my viewers night after night after night is that these people are unelected, right? These are unelected globalists, billionaires, whomever, who are in this inner circle. Heck, we have Brian Stelter, formerly of CNN, now joining the World Economic Forum. We have Edelman PR, as you pointed out. We have MasterCard, the head of the banking systems, are all there. These are unelected people who are driving these policies. And for the people watching our show, there's like a desperation there. Like, what can we do to stop this? What can we do? And I think maybe, and that's probably part of your investigative journalism here, sitting down with Whitney Webb, and you guys are sitting there saying, they're making him disappear off the internet. Things are disappearing. It's important for us, I think, as journalists to shine a light on this. Is that maybe where this starts, shining a light on this dark side?
Yeah, there's two things. One thing is the more they hide, the more they delete, the more they censor, the longer our articles become, because the more there is to talk about. And that then wakes more people up, and you can't go back to sleep once you've woken up. So you've got this element where they're reaching the pinnacle of their power. They're getting to the point where they will get no higher than this. They will drop away afterwards. I think they were at about 60-70%, and they've got a lot of hubris, a lot of what they believe, how they believe they're going to win this. The globalists, these technocrats, they got a lot of hubris, but that's kind of built into the system. Civilization works in cycles, and they know that, and they're not stupid. They don't ignore things like that. And eventually, an old Klaus Schwab, who's now 86, 87 years old, is going to die, and we're going to need a new savior. And all of these people over here then, who have got this evil-looking corporation, that's the World Economic Forum, they'll look even more evil. People will lose interest in them, and something else will rise up, something else that has been created by exactly the same people. I think, personally, that we're seeing that change happen now, and I think we should be worried about the World Economic Forum, but we got to understand that there's the new technocrats and neo-technocrats are coming, people like Elon Musk who are raising up. Yeah. And that's going to be the next wave.
I think you're right. And I think we will see a new, we see the guest list already dwindling this time around for this most recent World Economic Forum. But I think in some ways it's like a hydra, and we'll start to see these things popping up in other ways.
It's built that way.
It's built that way on purpose, you say?
Yeah. It's built that way. I mean, they're not stupid. Kissinger had multiple backup plans for everything that he did. So the whole, and it's not just Kissinger. We talk about Kissinger, but really what we're talking about is all of the efforts of the CFR being manifest through a human being, and that is Kissinger. So Kissinger is like a hydra. He's all these different people who are powerful behind the scenes, who have all these different interests, all mushing their interests together into one person who's going to enact that into policy, and then create like lots of different proteges and different followers and apprentices to enact these different parts of everything. It's created like that, we may focus on one person at some times, but this isn't like one big scary shark as in Jaws. This is a load of different sharks all over the place. They're circling you. When one goes, another will pop up. That is life. It has been that way since the dawn of time. I doubt that's going to change.